Took us a while to come up with a title for this evening's Dharma talk. I won't mention some of the other options. Let's just go with right under your nose. Is that it? So what we're endeavoring to point out by saying right under your nose is, sir, would you mind moving a little forward? It's hard for me to see you there. Thank you. By saying right under your nose, what is being emphasized and what we're endeavoring to point out, what I'm endeavoring to point out, is what you are looking for. Let's make an assumption here. Let's assume that you would like to be happy. Anyone here disagree with that? Okay. So actual happiness, not a happiness based on causes and conditions. On I'm getting ahead, whoops, now I'm falling behind. You know what that kind of happiness is like. But an actual happiness or understanding, or you could say, I don't know, you might use the word contentment, but not a laissez-faire contentment, not a contentment that was dropping off to sleep or ignoring everything. Then I would say it's right under your nose. When I say that, I'm saying it's actually in your perception. You already are looking at it. You don't have to go to another country. You don't have to join some kind of unusual religion. Certainly don't have to join this one. And we all know if you've taken stimulants or drugs, that doesn't last very long, and quite often has some very serious side effects, as they say. So when I say right under your nose, I'm saying that you have it. If you're here, if you're sitting in the bathroom, if you're sitting out in the garden, if you're sitting in your car, if you're laying down looking at the ceiling in your bedroom, doing dishes, whatever you're doing, it's right in front of you. And what is it? It's what this situation is actually about, what it actually is. And I can say in a couple of words what it actually is. I can say in lots of words what it actually is, but those are concepts about something. I might as well be reading off a recipe for chocolate cake. You know, it's not the chocolate cake. It's the words about it. It's the words pointing to it. And I would say what it is it is not separate. The fancy words in Buddhism are shunyata, or emptiness. Emptiness, interesting thing about this kind of emptiness, it's not the relative emptiness of empty and full, or existent, non-existent. It's not the relative situation. It's the emptiness that is in everything, all the time, everywhere. In order to see that, you have to look at whatever is in front of you. Whatever's in front of you at any given time, whether it's your thoughts, your ideas, your perceptions, the color of the carpeting, the color of the wall when you're all sitting looking at the wall, it's right there. That's why we do this kind of training. That's why we encourage you. You may not want to do this. You may want to move to Utah, do something else. You may want to join another kind of approach. Not wrong. We're not talking about right and wrong. We're just talking about thorough and complete, or probably not so complete. So what's right under your nose is the truth. Again, not a relative truth, but a fundamental truth of what this whole situation is that we call ourselves, our lives, our family, our country, our politics, our worldview, our emotions, our thoughts, our ideas, our opinions, all of the stuff that's coming and going. And we can go on like this and name all the different parts. It's like going through a grocery store, naming things. Naming. So it takes some time to do this, because initially, if you were to take this, what I'm saying literally, it's right under your nose, and you were just say, well, okay, then whatever, I'm going to listen to what he said. I'm going to see if I can see what this is. I'm looking at this. It's right under my nose. Well, you probably won't sit and look at a wall for very long. Eventually, you'll be doing something else. You'll be looking at your husband, your wife, your partner, your mom, your dad, your brother, sister, neighbor, friend, enemy, somebody, your dog, your cat. You'd be doing something. You'd be raking your leaves this time of year, perhaps, or maybe you just let them blow around into the neighbor's yard. Let them rake them. So, but what's important is, from this point of view, is to actually, whatever's arising with you, is to actually look at that and don't necessarily add on to it. The adding is something occur. You have a thought arise, and most people, in this case, I'm going to say, use guys, add on to things. Make up, what's that word? Shit. Make up stuff. Make up. We invent things. It's rare to actually sit still and have something come into your mind and not do something with it. Either try to push it down, I don't want to think about that, or fluff it up. Yeah, that's what they should have done. Yeah, I wish they'd have listened to me. Or I wish I'd have listened to them. Or, it's just like a tireless circularity that happens. Very difficult to be direct, because we want a payoff. And when we're direct, you don't get anything back. You can't get anything back from something you're not separate from. It's not a merchandising mentality. That's about worldly dharmas. That's about cause and effect, up and down, back and forth, success and failure, life and death, fame and disgrace, pride, humiliation, all of those polarities. We all know one or two of them, and sometimes we have a favorite. So what happens when you say, let's just say you were to listen to that, saying, oh, he's saying that's right under my nose. Okay, right under my nose. Maybe you don't do it this evening, or maybe 3 days from now you're in a difficult straits and you're having some kind of complication, or who knows what. It could be anything from just out and out boredom to being terrified of something that's about to happen to you because of something else that happened. Right under your nose. And of course, what's right under your nose is all of the stuff that is right and wrong and shouldn't happen, and if I'd have done this, if I'd have done that. That's where it starts at, but if you keep returning to what? Return to this. Keep returning to this. Keep returning to this. This is why we practice meditation, not to have wonderful states of mind that are somehow glorious and better than washing dishes. The reason we're doing this, the understanding behind this, is that you sit down, hold still, and you stretch the awareness so you can see not so much what's happening when you're meditating. Not much going to happen there. And in fact, and in fiction, the longer you meditate, the less is going to happen. I even have people to tell me occasionally. So I'm sitting there. It feels like I'm just sitting there. And I don't say this to them, but this is what I'm thinking. Good. I know how long it takes to get to that place where you're just sitting there and nothing's happening. This doesn't mean that everything stops and you turn into some kind of a carrot. It means that the kind of insight that is beginning to arise takes some time. So first you have to go through that period of time where not much is happening. You're just sitting here. You're just sitting. Your thoughts are no longer that particularly entertaining. When they come, you watch them, they go. Another one comes, another memory comes. Even threatening kinds of thoughts no longer can get your attention. Just sitting. talking about this. Other people's voices come and go. Thoughts about, regrets about the past, daydreams about the future come and go. No longer particularly interested in that. It's called cool boredom. You're cooling off your antsiness about wanting constant entertainment. Most people want constant entertainment starting from the time they're 3 months old right on up to full-grown adults. We all know lots of adults who are all about stirring things up, so something's going on, something's happening, something's got to be happening all the time. So by looking right under your nose, what's right in front of you, which is what that means, looking right at that, that is it. As I was saying at the book study the other night, it's that carpet. Excuse me, you have to see that, though you can't just see the name carpet and who made it and what color it is and how it needs to be shampooed. You can't see necessarily a whole lot of things about it. You might see those, but don't do anything with those. Just keep looking at it. And eventually, you begin to see fundamentally what it is. And there's a teaching in Buddhism called the Three Natures. I'm not going to elaborate on that too much, but I can do it a little bit. What you see, generally what people see is called the imaginary nature. They see imaginary stuff. Something that's not actually particularly real. And then they attribute that to someone who's thinking it and someone who's seeing it. And so we think there's somebody who's seeing something else. It's the nature of duality. But if you hang in there, if you stay in there, and if you're sincere, and if you want to see this for yourself, then you don't give up. You keep going, and you keep going, and you keep going. Keep going into that deeper and deeper. And each person has to do that in a different way. All the different people that I talk to are at different levels of that. Some people are maybe close to some kind of a breakthrough that maybe never happens. Another person, I don't think they're ever going to get to anywhere, and they suddenly start having some kind of insight into something, some kind of understanding. Usually if you have really powerful insight into something, you won't tell me about it. If you start telling me about it, probably pretty weak. You're looking for a credential. You're looking for my approval. I'm not interested. So what happens if you insist on looking under your nose? What happens if you hold still on the cushion and do this, and then when you get up off the cushion, you go into what is called post-meditation, your everyday life, or you're having difficulty with your anyone, your mate, your neighbor, someone you're just having a misunderstanding with, your coworkers or your employer, you just can't seem to get them to think what you think they should be thinking about what you're thinking. Not all that funny. People are actually trying to get somebody else to think. We even say it sometimes. You're talking to somebody and we'll even say, without really realizing how hilarious it is, what we're saying. Well, Jim, I don't want you to think that, that I think you look like a polar bear. We can't even control what we think ourselves, and yet we're talking about, well, I don't really want you to think. What is this about? Circularity, and it's about reestablishing some kind of belief in a self and a belief in another. My friends, please inspect that closer. I'm not saying you can't relax and have a good time with your life. I'm not saying you have to move into a monastery. Monastery. But there is no solid person here or there. Don't believe a word I say. Doubt everything. Don't disbelieve anything I say. Don't do anything with it. You're here, so you might as well listen. So if we look right under our nose and we look at that ball of ideas, confusions, opinions, hopes and fears, trepidation about what's going to happen and worries about this and about that. And we insist, you could say, through just our insistence, just our sincerity with ourselves. We want to, if you were to say what's happening, you would be saying, I want to see this, I want to see this, I'm going to work on this until I see it. What else are you going to do with your life? Learn to drive a tractor? They have tractors on your farm? Are you learning to drive one? Well, that's probably next on the list. I have nothing against tractors, by the way. I love tractors, especially big John Deere tractors. So under your nose, if you look at what that is, you will see that it's a pack of lies. That it's just a bunch of made-up stuff about everything. We're constantly thinking about, would you rather sit in a chair? Would you be more comfortable? You're welcome to. There's one right back there. But by going down into that and insisting on seeing what that is, we eventually begin to see that we're making a lot of stuff up about what is actually there. And what it actually is there, it's just that it's not separate and it is dependently arisen. Nothing comes from its own side as an independent, self-existing thing that's all its own deal. Everything is dependent on everything else for its apparent identity. It's just a statement, a relative statement, a conceptual statement that this person is making based on teachings of Buddhism that go back centuries. But it seems that each person has to see that for themselves. This is called direct perception. And what is direct about it is that you are seeing it so clearly that there's just a perception, that you actually perceive that there is no perceiver, there's nothing extra, and there's nothing perceived. Therefore, it's direct perception. And it is, to elaborate on that a little further, this is kind of a difficult teaching, but it needs to be said. Direct perception of emptiness. The direct perception of things are empty of what you think they are. They're empty of a self and they're empty of an other. Empty of this and empty of that. We're not saying that there isn't somebody over there who's going to the store and somebody over here who's, what should I say, to rhyme, I would say mopping the floor. Would that work? I'm saying we're not saying that there aren't 2 or 3 or 5 or 10,000 things happening. It's just that if you see what one thing is, if you see that carpeting, what it actually is, it is not separate. And when you see that, you've seen everything. I'm not saying you've seen the moons of Jupiter. I'm not saying that there's some kind of extension. But even the extension is not separate. Even looking down at the floor, going outside and looking straight up where your sight doesn't stop. It goes on, as far as we know, indefinitely. So to see that what you're looking at is dependently arisen and not just, and be able to see through the imaginary, the ideas, the opinions, the projections of that's over there, I'm over here, to be able to see through that is to see what is fundamentally true, which is everything is discontinuous. I'm ready for under your nose questions. Sheldon.
What is it about direct perception that makes it so difficult that you can't just give us a bunch of steps to take so that we have direct perception?
I give you the steps that I was given. Sit down, hold still, look at it. That's pretty powerful if you do it. Now, what we misunderstand is we think that we can do that in an hour a day, or 45 minutes every 3 days, or that we can do a little bit of it. It seems to take a lot of time to do it, because we have the causes and conditions that brought us into this situation, and the time, if you want to use time, which I'm using it here, so I might as well continue to use it. It's so extensive. We've been here for a long time. And so when we do slow down and back off on the speediness, slow down and find some time to hold still, as we do in this monastery, we slowly begin to turn that whole trajectory, or that whole, what is that called when something's starting to take a direction and keeps going? Momentum. That momentum it's hard to turn that around. Something that is going downhill or being pulled by gravity, the gravity of belief. We believe certain things are true, unexamined beliefs. People live by them all the time. They just take things for granted. They've been taught this, that's what they believe. They can live a whole life based on what somebody else told them, rather than what they saw for themselves. I'm not encouraging you to believe anything. Certainly I'm not going to say believe in the Buddha, believe in Buddhism. I would say don't believe me, don't believe anybody, don't believe anything. Inspect everything for yourself. Find out for yourself. As a Dharma teacher, that's what I tell my students. You need to find this out. How do you do that? Sit down, watch your own mind, and see the way you keep believing some things and disbelieving others. I like this, I don't like that. I want this, I don't want that. This is valuable, this is not. Separating something that is not basically separate. So that's why it's difficult, because we just don't do it. We would rather come back and just go in circles and daydream and think about things and imagine this and imagine that. Spend time doing things. You could call it wasting time. I don't think it's necessarily wasting time. That's what you want to do. But from the point of view of understanding what the Buddha is pointing at, it would be wasting time. As it says in the Four Reminders, first contemplate the preciousness of being free and well-favored. Difficult to gain, easy to lose. Now I must do something meaningful. What should you do that's meaningful? Find out who you are. Not what you were taught, not what somebody thinks you are, not what you think you are. Find out without a doubt, so there's no doubt about who you are and what you are and what this life is about. What does it mean to be a living being? There's billions of us. We've got 15, 20 people here. This only doesn't happen all over the place. It's rare. Questions? Since you?
When that simple instruction of sitting down,
Yes.
holding still and looking at it feels difficult to do, like if what you're looking at feels intolerable,
Yes.
then what to do?
Well, the way you put it feels intolerable. Take a break. Not about torturing yourself. Do it a little at a time. Like you don't necessarily sit down and do reading light on yoga. Sit down and try to do every single posture in there. Have you read Light on Yoga? I bet you have. Have you too? There's just hundreds of pictures of what's his name, Iyengar? So, but just a little at a time. So you sit down, and they might look the same. Everybody's sitting doing the same thing. Everybody's sitting. But one person has been sitting for years. So what's happening with their body, speech, mind combination is probably different than what's happening with a person who started 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago, 3 years ago. And I'm not saying that it's just time that's involved. It's also all the karma that you bring to the situation, all the passion, aggression, ignorance, all of the conditioning that you've had to deal with how you were treated when you were raised, how you were treated in this lifetime or past lifetimes. I'm not here to promote lifetimes. Don't believe anything I say. I'm not asking you to believe in anything. I don't believe in past lifetimes, so why should I ask you to? I also don't disbelieve in them. If you think about those two simple statements, don't believe, don't disbelieve, and you understand what I'm saying, that's really all you need. You may not even need to meditate if you can understand what that says. It's neither true nor is it untrue. This is called transcendence. In what do they call those, nutshells? Yeah, little tiny containers that squirrels make. Isn't that where those come from? Squirrels? So it's a matter of just continuing. And that's why a sangha, a group of people, the community, meditation community, sangha, the truth is being taught. Nothing is separate. Everything is dependently arisen. Look under your nose, those kinds of things. And the teacher, or the person who lived 2,500 years ago, who said, everything is dependently arisen, nothing comes from its own side, everything is suffering, and it's suffering because it wants things to be different. That's the reason you suffer. However things are, you don't want that. Not just you, but all of us. So the important thing is to do it anyway, but don't turn into some kind of a fanatic about it. Sit for a little while. If you really get antsy or something is really getting difficult, maybe you need to get up and go for a walk. Especially you should go for a walk. You like to walk, don't you? Yeah. Sokuzan.
Earlier you had said that happiness is in our perception. I was wondering if you could clarify what you meant when you said happiness is in our perception.
So was I speaking about happiness, unhappiness, the relative kind, or was I speaking about ultimate?
Ultimate.
Yeah.
My understanding was ultimate happiness.
So the ultimate situation is you're neither concerned with happiness nor unhappiness. You're no longer picking and choosing anything. You're not unhappy with this. You notice that cow manure doesn't smell so good, and you notice that lilacs smell wonderful. But you're not saying everything should smell like lilacs from now on. That's someone who insists on happiness all the time. You're no longer making any demand on anything. So anything that happens in this world is part of this world. And so therefore, just to be alive and be part of this world is free and well favored. I mean, you're free. There isn't a person in here, I would venture to say, that has any idea how they got to be a human being. I mean, do you remember being something else and planning, say, I'm going to try being a human. I'm just going to see what that's like. I mean, what the heck? I've been an alien for 15 centuries, or whatever it is, rotation around that particular star system. Or maybe you're in another realm. Maybe you're in a realm that doesn't have a physical manifestation. And I'm not just kidding here. I'm just saying that if you can think of it, it can happen. You don't have to believe it or disbelieve it. Have you noticed in a dream how anything can happen? Including nightmares. This doesn't mean that the kind of happiness where you're going to enjoy nightmares necessarily, but some kind of basic understanding that you're no longer at war with anything. That's the kind of happiness I'm talking about. A kind of happiness where there isn't anywhere else to go. There's nothing else to do. There's nothing else to accomplish. This doesn't mean that you won't take on all kinds of projects. You may take on more projects than you've ever done in your life just because you're no longer afraid of failure. You no longer see success and failure in the same way that you did and all of your friends and relatives did and the whole world did. Now you just see you're just doing this and you're doing that. If this works out, fine. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. It's just things are, you could say, dancing with the way things come and go. It's just the nature of physical manifestation.
Question from Karen in New Zealand. She asks, when it's under one's nose, can a certain detachment from one's environment occur?
It could. Generally speaking, we're not talking about a kind of detachment that is pushing away or deliberately being detached, but perhaps a kind of detachment where there's not a lot of seduction and aversion going on. So there may be some, but a kind of detachment where you can see that you're not really, that the world is no longer controlling you through magnetizing you and pushing you away. So it could be some there. Yes.
The idea of mental projections are imaginary.
Yes.
When those occur, which seems to happen frequently for me, is there some way I can remind myself that they're imaginary?
Well, it can be difficult if you've been, as we've talked about before, if something has happened and that has triggered something that is in you, like in your back pocket, that you don't want to examine, that you keep ignoring about your particular life, your mind, something that you've not really looked at closely. If that little pouch, shall we say, of unexamined whatever, sadness, aggression, depression, give it whatever name you want, but some kind of difficulty, some situation there that needs to be aired out, then if something else out here comes along and triggers that and causes that, resonates with that, just like when the drum in the zendo, when the drum strikes, we have a dozen or so windows in here, one of those windows starts to rattle. So it's a similar kind of resonance, like someone does something that resonates with some area. Sometimes it's just a situation that comes up. Sometimes it's another Sangha member. Sometimes it's your teacher. Sometimes it's just the time of day. Just something happens in a day where you just start to have to go down into that unexamined swamp. And as far as reminding yourself, I think you're already doing it. All you have to do is when that starts to happen, tell yourself, say to yourself, everything is dependently arisen. Nothing comes from its own side. There's other ways of slogans that we sometimes use. Atisha's 59 slogans, maybe one of those would fit. The one that I've sometimes given to people that I heard someplace, I don't know who I heard it from, I certainly didn't invent it, is thank you very much, I have no complaints whatsoever. You're feeling like crap, but you're going to move against that by saying, thank you very much, I have no complaints whatsoever. Difficult. But it does something, it sets up another resonance. So you're not going to war with that so much as you're just going to include, along with the negative things you're going through, you're going to include something that is positive. Sometimes this is what mantra practice is about, is getting us to get into an area of mind where the resonance is not about negativity so much more.
Well, sometimes when one of those negative triggers occurs, I have an expectation that by reminding myself mentally or doing one of those mantras that I'll feel better. But that's not always the case. So what's the approach to use during that period of difficulty?
Watch the motivation to do that is I'll feel better. So it seems to be necessary to have a willingness to be however you feel. When that kind of thing arises, if a willingness to continue to feel that way, to not want that to be different than it is. That's the only way. I don't say it's the only way, but as far as the way it looks here, it's a way that you can actually sink down into that deeply. running away from it, trying to find something that will make that stop happening. So the other thing I can say, which I say to everyone, is a lot of sitting meditation, so that when those kind of things happen, they're happening to a person who has been emphasizing the awareness rather than what arises in the awareness. So that the awareness, so that whatever that negativity comes up, it doesn't enter a broom closet in your mind. It enters a vast mind that is like an open field. You know, a lot of negativity arising here, happening in an open field, has a lot of breathing room. Just an image, just a metaphor. Or,
But thoughts seem so real.
yeah, they do. Well, they're both real and unreal. We don't even know what they are. We all talk about them all the time. What have you been thinking? I don't know. What have you been thinking? But we don't really know. We kind of know what they do, but we don't know exactly what is a thought. Anybody know? Scientists will tell you, well, it's this, and they'll point to this part of the brain, or they'll point to, because science is materialistic, and it can't stand to not know stuff. So even the things that it doesn't know, it'll have conjecture about that. Well, there isn't anything there, or there's nothing to know there. That's why it totally avoids the entire spirit world. Most scientists do. The ones that do go there get a bad rap, and they're looked down upon by all the other materialistic scientists. It's like people complaining to people who saying the earth is round, and everybody said, no, it's flat. That's nuts. The world can't be round. You'd fall off. It's like saying, no, there can't be other realms beyond the physical realm. Otherwise, we'd know about it. We'd be able to prove that. Proof is always partial. You don't really need proof. Only ego needs proof. Materialism, somebody who wants to get ahead of everybody else, they need proof. So it's materialism. It's my teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, in his book, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, talks about it in depth. I highly recommend that book. We study it here in this monastery every Tuesday night. Been studying it for a long time. Further questions? We have some time. So I apparently made everything very clear. That's why there's no questions. Jason.
Coming back to right under your nose, I'm wondering if there's a way we could begin to recognize happiness under our nose in the midst of difficulty, or what that type of happiness looks like when it doesn't look so happy.
Well, I think that's it. Doesn't look so happy. So the assumption is the good feelings, bad feelings, is that there's some kind of polarity. We need to keep away the bad feelings and get the good feelings. So I think that's part of the difficulty. We get magnetized into that, and it's very difficult to work with that, because it isn't like going the other way and saying, you should be a masochist and enjoy your bad feelings. I think it's a matter of having a wider view and more of an open view. And also seeing that everything is perception only, as our the teachings in the Yogacara tradition are saying that everything you see is just perception. There's no solid self perceiving that, and there's no solid thing being perceived. There's just a perception. This gets a little abstract, but it seems to be something that's necessary to say, because we are so attached to our physical form and our nerve endings. It's just so convincing. The body it's so convincing that we're here, but this is a very low vibration of reality called physical reality. When you go to sleep at night, You have a whole nother, you could even be another person. Are there people here who have dreamt they were somebody different than they are in this, had a dream that you were maybe an animal or another, the opposite sex, or another person, or a younger person, or an older person? So that whole area is, while it's happening, is really intense. It's unusual to be in a dream and suddenly realize you're dreaming. It does happen, called a lucid dream. It doesn't happen often. I think part of the misunderstanding, or the difficulty with that, is thinking that there must be some way that you'll just feel really good all the time about the perception that you've seen that is right under your nose. That if you just see what's under your nose, that you'll have this wonderful feeling all the time. That's just not the nature of nerve endings. Mm-hmm.
Daniel Tucker from Kalamazoo has a question. He asks, can you explain more about how the "thank you very much, I have no complaints whatsoever" practice works?
So all you're really doing is saying, and you can use this, you can say, "Thank you very much, I have no complaints whatsoever." And you can count it on have a mala and with beads, and count it, say it over and over and over again, slow way down and say it very slowly, thinking of every word. You can speed way up and do that. You can go back and forth and do that. And I think what it does, it takes the thinking part of the mind and the speech part, and it it just runs it through a process, an evening or maybe a lengthening or a smoothing process that helps us stretch our awareness out in a different way than just sitting practice of meditation. This is why mantra is used so much, especially in Tibetan Buddhism. Mantra and visualization. It's very complicated stuff. Sometimes some of the mantras there you do in the millions. That's a lot to count on a mala. So it's something you could experiment with. I don't necessarily recommend that people do mantra practice. As a just general recommendation, I think it's up to you. And I sometimes talk, if I talk to individual people, sometimes we'll talk because of what a person is particularly going through. We may look at doing mantra practice or possibly white Tara practice, something like that. But we don't do anything too complicated as they do in the four main lineages of Tibetan Buddhism.
So when one is having difficulty, maybe some depression or negative feeling arises with somebody else, is that a time to do that mantra practice right in the midst of it?
Perhaps. I think less is better. A lot depends on what you're actually working with, what you're going through. I mean, everyone is so. Some people, there's no way for you to know how I feel. There's no way for me to know how you feel. Sometimes when someone is really having a hard time, we tend to resonate with them, and we kind of get a feeling, somewhat of a feeling for what's going on. But there's no way to really say for sure what's happening with another person. So for me to arbitrarily say, you're going through this and do this, and the idea of saying, well, try this, well, try that, I don't really care for that approach too much. I would rather work with a person individually if I can. So far I only have a few dozen students, so no problem. So I would say if that arose for you, something like what was just mentioned, that mantra, I wouldn't necessarily go in and just do Om Mani Padme Hum, Mani Padme Hum, Mani Padme Hum, Mani Padme Hum, Mani Padme Hum. I wouldn't just do that without some kind of a structure, and also without someone to function as a teacher in that area. To do that without a teacher just to be checking it out or trying it would be misunderstanding what it's about. Of course, you can do whatever you want to do. Yes, sir.
Could you speak more on the Mani Padme Hum mantra and more, I guess, just explain, just speak on it?
Just, I don't practice that. I've done some of it, so I know what it's about, but I don't have it as an extended practice. It's a Mani Padme Hum. It's from, I think it's Chenrezig practice. There's a Tibetan practices that use that particular mantra. There's lots of mantras. The Tibetans are just big on all kinds of practices and mantras and visualizations, and you never could get them all done if you were to start. Even in one particular lineage, you couldn't do them all. But I think it's just a way to, you have a visualization that you visualize. It's called deity yoga, and you visualize a deity that is a representative. It isn't an actual deity. It's your wisdom mind, which is hard to locate because we always feel kind of nuts, and say, where? Well, I can't find my wisdom mind anywhere. All I can find is crazy Sokuzan. So what we do is we have an idealized version. We might have a tanka or a painting, and we might have a rupa like over there on the white Tara, that little rupa, that metal form there, a white Tara. We look at that and we maybe close our eyes or leave them open and visualize. In this case, white Tara, and then see her in front of us or on top of our head or as our whole form, and then we would talk to her. If this is what you're asking me about, then we would talk to her. We would say, the Sanskrit is Om Tari Tutari Turi Mame Punyajana Pushtam Kriya Sa. You'd say that, and every time you'd say it, then you'd move a bead, Om Tari Tutari Turi Savaha, which is the short form. And then you would be visualizing her, and you'd be visualizing in her heart center rays of light coming out. A pretty fancy, imaginary kind of thing where you're actually trying to hook up with that aspect of your wisdom mind. So that was the thing that came out of ancient India and ancient Tibet, and it's still taught all over the place. I practice some of those practices extensively. I just don't teach them unless I meet someone that just seems like that's what they need to do, and we do that mutually. I don't just assign somebody that practice. But I would say if you want to check something like that out, then you could. And there's people, there are Tibetan lamas that teach that. There are people who are here in the West that don't have any credentials at all that teach it. I certainly don't have any credentials, and and I teach that. The Tibetans will tell you you have to be a teacher in the lineage, or you can't do that. You have to do that. And I would say if that's the way you feel, then do that. But I don't think you have to believe something just because somebody says that. Further questions? Anything else on that? Oh, well, it's the end of the journey. Thank you so much.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit at the back of your red chant books. I'd also like to remind everybody that we do have donation boxes in the hallway and eagerly accept your financial help to support the practices and teachings that occur here. Also remind everybody this Saturday is our all-day sitting practice from 9 in the morning till 9 at night, so please join us if you can.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jio San Shi Shi Hu Shi Song Sa Moko Sa Moko Ten directions, the three worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down under the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.